Hey, it's Phil. I just wanted to tell you about a giveaway that we're doing on this week's episode. On this show, I'll be talking to Dave Bossert, who is a retired Disney animator, and he is the author of a new book called 3D Disneyland Like You've Never Seen It Before. This book is full of 3D images of Disneyland from the 1950s through the 1980s, and it even comes with a cool pair of retro 3D glasses. In order to enter to win, all you have to do is listen to the full episode and answer the trivia question at the end of the show. Good luck and enjoy the show.
From the Ear to There Travel Studio, this is the Ear to There Disney Podcast.
The Ear to There Podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Ear to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Ear to There Disney Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Gramlich. I am also the owner and the founder of Ear to There Travel, a Disney-specialized travel agency. It is my job, along with all of the agents on the Ear to There Travel team, to take away listen, you've heard it before, to take away all that stress, all that anxiety, and all that time that it takes to plan a Disney trip, so you can focus on the most important things, like having a phenomenal time with your family and friends, and enjoying the magic. You can listen to this podcast, meet all of the vacationeers or agents on the Ear to There Travel team, or get your free, no obligation quote over at eartotheretravel.com. All right, this is episode number 210 of the show, and today I'm going to be talking to retired Disney animator and current author Dave Bossert all about his time working in Disney animation and all about his new upcoming books. So do me a favor, grab a drink, grab a snack, and as a famous mouse once said, ha, oh boy, on with the show. Would you believe I took it was 6 takes of trying to do the Mickey voice, and my voice was scratchy on every one, so listen, that was my best take for today, all right? Before we get into the chat with Dave Bossert, it is time for the What About Bob segment of the show. This is where Disney legend and retired Imagineer Bob Gurr joins me to answer my questions and yours, or your questions and mine, however I normally say that on the show. And I say it every week, if you're not quite sure who Bob Gurr is, Bob was hired by Walt Disney himself in 1954. His first job was creating the Autopia cars, the bodies of the Autopia cars. And then he just hung on for years and years and years, worked with Walt, and came up with all kinds of cool things, like the Main Street vehicles, the fire engine, the Matterhorn, the monorails, you name it. If it's on wheels in Disneyland or Walt Disney World, Bob Gurr designed it. And the What About Bob segment is brought to you by the Waltland Bus Tour. These tours will be resuming in 2021. You can buy a ticket and get on a bus, and Bob Gurr will take you all around Southern California with stops in Los Angeles, in Glendale, and in Burbank. Well, Bob doesn't drive the bus, there's a driver, but he has the microphone and he hosts the tour. You will see all kinds of famous historic sites in the history that's redundant of the Walt Disney Company, but more importantly, in the life and times of its founder, the one and only Walt Disney. Keep an eye on the website to get tickets for the Waltland Bus Tour. The site is www.waltland.com. All right, here he is, the original test dummy for the Matterhorn, my friend Bob Gurr.
It's What About Bob? Bob Gurr, the legend, creator of the Matterhorn, the monorails and the Haunted Mansion. What about Bob, the Disney legend?
I know you're not a collector, but if you could have one other Disney attraction vehicle, what would you pick?
Oh, I'll just bring the fire engine back up to my garage. That's all. Sure.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
to me.
the day they take it out of service will be about 100 years from now, though. So No chance.
Yeah, right. Thank you to Bob for answering another question on the show. I should have known it would be the fire engine. I mean, really, who wouldn't want the Disneyland fire engine parked in their garage or their driveway, for real? So thanks again, Bob, and we're going to move on now to my chat with Dave Bossert. Enjoy. My guest today was an effects animator for Disney Animation, where he worked on classic films like The Little Mermaid and The Lion King. He's also an author with a brand new book coming out soon titled 3D Disneyland, like you've never seen it before. Dave Bossert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Phil, it's fantastic to be here with you. I appreciate you having me on.
Dave, I'm so excited, and thank you for coming on. I've been looking forward to this. I've been meaning to email you for a while. I was going to email you about your last book, but I kind of missed it when you were first selling it, so I'm really excited about this one.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, there's been a lot of excitement about this 3D Disneyland book because it's filled with photos people have never seen before of the park.
Yeah, so what a really cool idea this is. And have you where does the inspiration from this come from? Were you always a Disney fan, always a Disneyland fan?
It's really a bit of an odd story because all those photographs that are in the book were taken by a very good friend of mine and colleague. He and I worked together at Disney for many years. I considered him a friend, not only a friend, but a mentor and a colleague at Disney Animation. And his name is Ted Kiersey. And he took these pictures, like he was at Disneyland the first week that Disneyland opened. And he had bought himself a few months before that a beautiful Kodak Aniston stereo camera. And a stereo camera has two lenses on it, Phil. There's what I consider it to be like the way your eyes are spaced apart on your face. There's two lenses on the face of this camera. And he started snapping these 3D photographs in July of 1955 and continued to do it throughout the 50s and into the early 60s. And then he went back in 1980 on the 25th anniversary of Disneyland, and he shot a whole bunch of pictures as well. And when we were splitting an office on Beauty and the Beast, we were both working on Beauty and the Beast together. He brought in some of these pictures. Now, I got to tell you guys, I grew up on the East Coast. And so I had never gone to Disneyland until about 1980, 81. And so I didn't know what the park looked like when it first opened. So when he brought some of these pictures in to show me, I was blown away. And this is more than 25 years ago, by the way. And I made the quip to him back then, hey, Ted, you ought to really consider putting these in a book for people to really see and enjoy, because these are photos that many people have never seen of Disneyland. And we had a laugh about it, and we went on with our careers, and he had already been working at the studio probably for about 15 years before I got hired. And so he wound up a 44 year career at Disney and retired. And I had worked at the studio for 32 years before I retired. And we kept in touch. He's much older than I am, and I remind him of that all the time. And so I was, he had moved out of Los Angeles in his retirement, and I've gone out to visit him at his new home. And on one of those visits a couple years ago, he started showing me some of the slides again, and I said, Ted, I've been writing books now. Let's get this. Let's do this book together. And he said, okay. And that's how this book came about.
That's so cool. you reminded me of a couple things while you were telling me the story. The one thing is, are you a member? I don't know if you're online or social media much. There's a site, DisneyHistoryInstitute.com.
Yeah. I'm fully familiar with it, and I actually know some of the folks that run that. Yeah.
Oh wow, because they're always posting these old, 1950s and 60s images of Disneyland. I am just like you, fascinated by what the park looked like back in those days. I love like the pictures of the Rivers of America with the Mark Twain on it, with the trees that are, basically saplings, and there's all these people that are taller than the trees in the land, and it looks nothing like it does today. I love that stuff. So as soon as I saw this book, I was like, man, this is right up my alley. There's another book that this kind of reminds me of, although your idea is much more unique. And Jeff Curdy did a book a few years ago with, I forget the name of it. I have it on my shelf, but it's basically Disneyland, and there's pictures of it in the 50s, and then there's a picture of it in like the 2000s.
Oh, and it's like a before and after book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that book because I love the idea that you can touch these things that Walt Disney touched, and the Imagineers that worked on Disneyland. And I've always been fascinated by that stuff. And so what a cool idea and what a cool concept for a book this is. I can't wait to get a copy of it. Just a couple things. First of all, 3D book. Do I need to buy 3D glasses to look at this?
No, because the glasses come with the book.
Okay. And
so that's the first thing. And, I have to tell you that, these photos were taken, there's a left eye and a right eye image. And so you can look at them separated like that with a special viewer, and that merges the two together. But we decided to create what's known as anaglyph images. And an anaglyph image, I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure people in your audience have seen it. It's essentially you're overlaying the two photos, and each one's tinted magenta, one's tinted cyan. And when you put on the glasses that have the magenta and cyan lenses, you get to see a 3D image. And we did that because it was the most practical way to show these photographs to a mass audience. Doing it the other way, the images would have had to have been done much smaller, and you would have had to have had a special viewer and all of those kinds of things. And it just was impractical for the regular person to experience,
Sure.
And so we decided to do the anaglyph images, and that allowed us to actually make the images as big as we could on each page. And we showcase each image, like one image on a page. There's been books put out before where, they cram a bunch of pictures onto one page. We did not want to do that with this because it just kind of destroys the experience. By showcasing one large photograph on a page with a nice white border, what you're doing is you're creating a windowing effect. And what that means is that the white border, imagine the white border as a wall, and the picture is a window. And when you're looking at that picture, it actually enhances the 3D quality of the image.
Very cool. So it's like the 50s, like the old school movies where people would go in the 50s and wear the red and blue kind of glasses.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess I'm guessing completely here, but I'm guessing that's where, why those cameras came out in the 50s was I guess it was a phase or a craze where people, were really getting into that type of thing.
Well, something, 3D photography actually goes back to the beginning of photography back in the 1800s. And a lot of people in the late 1800s would have 3D cards where you had the left and right eye image on a card, and that would drop into a special viewer, usually made out of wood, that had lenses, and you'd look through the lenses and it would merge those two images together and give you this 3D effect. And in fact, if you're down at Disneyland and you go to the arcade on Main Street, they have some of those old time machines where you drop a nickel in and you can crank through a bunch of photos and it creates movement. But there's also, I think there are a couple where they have the 3D images. And so anyway, from my standpoint, 3D photography's kind of come in and out of fashion over the years, as you can imagine. I give a little history of that in the text of the book. And it's still something that there's a lot of 3D or stereo photography, as it's called, stereo photography enthusiasts out there. And they're still creating 3D images.
I had no idea that it went back that far. I've taken my kids to the Penny Arcade in Disneyland, and also at the boardwalk in Walt Disney World, they have some of those old mutoscopes that you can look in and crank. I don't even think the ones at boardwalk require a quarter anymore. You just can go do it.
I think they used to charge for it. I think they're probably free now. You know?
From what I understand, those were sitting in storage at Magic Kingdom for years, and they brought them back out and put them in boardwalk.
Which I think is fantastic. I think people enjoy those kinds of things. It's a little glimpse back in back in the past, and it's history. And that's really what we looked at with these 3D photos of Disneyland. They're showing things that no longer exist. The Skyway to Tomorrowland and the Skyway to Fantasyland that went through the Matterhorn Mountain. There's those kinds of photos. There's looking at Rivers of America when it was just planted with shrubs, and the Mark Twain looks huge compared to the surrounding foliage, And
what did they call the Storybook Land canal boats? I think they called it like the mud banks of the world. Because it's just full of mud.
Exactly. So I think that anybody who's a fan of Disneyland or the theme parks will really enjoy this, because there are pictures that are a throwback to a period of time where many of us, including myself, I wasn't around to, I wasn't even born yet when Disneyland opened. And here my friend Ted was there the week it was open.
I love that stuff. Anyone who worked on Disneyland, who was around in the early days, I want to talk to them. I want to hear their story. I just, there's something about that I'm just completely in love with that stuff.
I love the history of it all. I think it's just wonderful. And what's great about stereo photography and what, the images that are in 3D Disneyland, like you've never seen it before, is that it's not only just capturing a moment, it's capturing that moment in time and space, so you actually see it as a dimensional image. Now, I will tell you, though, there are a couple of images in there where I don't think the 3D is as great as others, but I put them in there because of the historic nature of the photo.
That makes sense. I mean, do you have any pictures of Walt in the book?
Yeah, so very good point. So, when we were selecting the photos to go in here, I came up with this concept of wanting to do a walking tour of Disneyland. And so the book is laid out where you start outside of the berm at the entrance, looking up at the main train station. And then you're in the town square, you're down Main Street, you're in the hub. And then you're off to, the Plaza Hub, and then you're off to Adventureland and New Orleans Square and Critter Country and Rivers of America, Frontierland. You get to see a 3D photo of the Conestoga wagons, which were long gone by the time I got to Disneyland. And then from Frontierland, you see the castle, Fantasyland, the original Fantasyland with the sort of Renaissance fair facades, which is really cool, and the original Dumbo ride and all of that. And then you're up in the gondolas of the Skyway. You see some photos of Small World, and there's a couple of contemporary images, 3D images from Toontown. And then you're into Tomorrowland, the sub ride, the monorails, the people movers, Autotopia. You're seeing photos of the train stations in some of those areas. And when we got that all laid out, really, I felt like the thing that was missing the most was a picture of Walt. And so we bookend all of the Disneyland photos with images of Walt. There's one at the beginning and there's one at the end. And I will tell you that your listeners may have seen these pictures before, but they've never seen them in 3D. And so the first image that you'll see of Walt Disney is at the dedication of Fantasyland at the opening of Disneyland in 1955. And using digital technology, we were able to do a conversion of that photo into a 3D image, which really is, it's like you see Walt in 3D. And then at the end of the book, we have this wonderful photo of Walt sitting on a bench in the town square looking down Main Street. And again, people may have seen that image, but they've never seen it in 3D.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when you were explaining it all, like how I love that idea, how it goes through the entire park, because two of the things that I do, and this is how much of a nerd I am, is I will do first-person tours of Disneyland on YouTube at night when I'm by myself and just do the walkthrough. Just like watch when somebody else, especially over the last few months where I haven't been able to get to the parks, I've watched it. And I also have it was the Connect Disneyland Adventures game, but now I have it on my PC. And I'll play that just to walk around Disneyland. I don't even play the game. I just walk around, look at stuff.
Are they still doing that in the Magic Kingdom down in Orlando?
They do have the Sorcerers of Magic Kingdom. Yeah, but I was talking about the one that was for Xbox.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It came out maybe like 8 or 10 years ago or so, but you can get it on the PC now. You can download it. So that's what I literally just walk around Disneyland like a crazy person by myself in a video game, and I love that stuff. So, and I think the average listener to this podcast is like me. They're just, super fans who love this stuff.
Right.
And I want to go back in time with you in a minute if we can. But
sure.
Before I don't want to forget, when does the book come out?
So we are anxiously waiting right now because I was hopeful that we'd be shipping the book right now because we did a limited edition of 750 signed and numbered with a special holographic emblem in the book. And that was because of the pandemic we're in right now. Ted and I weren't going to be able to go out to do any kind of book signings. So we came up with this idea. The publisher loved it. And so there was a limited edition of only 750 books that are going to be signed and numbered and with that holographic emblem in it. Those should be shipping in 2 to 3 weeks. And literally, we're waiting for those books to show up, Phil. I'm sure most people listening have experienced delays with shipping, getting packages, or even their mail service lately. We are experiencing a little bit of a delay in the shipping of all of these books, but they're coming. They're going to be here, and it's as I've said to people, sometimes it's anticipation. It just keeps us waiting, as the song goes.
It's been a bit of an insane time. Yeah, I mean, we as I was saying before we hit record, my kids are in school, but they're home, and everything is kind of backwards. So
yeah,
but and
that's kind of what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the book, the limited edition is going to go out in the next couple of weeks to everybody who pre-ordered those. That limited edition, by the way, is sold out. So if people want to get the book, they can get it through our publisher. The publisher's offering an author-signed copy, and they can also just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, or they can go to their local bookstore and ask their local bookstore to order it.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said.
And by the way, the official release is October 27th to the general public. So everybody who's pre-ordered the limited edition book will have it before then.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward to I can't wait to get my copy. I know my poor wife and kids, I'm going to lock them I'm going to lock myself in my office for a couple hours when I get it. Just let them take care of it.
By the way, I did ask that they order extra 3D glasses to make those available through the publisher's website, because of the fact that, like you have small children, the glasses may get destroyed.
Yeah. And also they're going to want to look at it with me. Like that's another thing. Like they're going to, when I get that book, I'll be honest with you, Dave, they don't have a chance in life. I've made them complete Disney nerds. They've gone to Walt Disney World 25 plus times, Disneyland twice, Disney cruises. I mean, they don't have a chance. So they're going to want to sit down and go through the book as soon as I get it as well. So, all right. So when it does come out, you can also get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places, bookstores. Okay. So I want everybody to go get it as soon as it comes out, because I'm super excited about it. And all right. So here's where I want to jump into DeLorean, go back in time a little bit, because I want to ask you a couple questions, if that's okay, about your time working for the Disney company. So I mentioned in the intro that you worked in Disney animation as an effects animator, and then you became supervising effects animator?
Yeah, I was a visual effects supervisor and directed, produced, executive produced. I always tell people I've done everything from executive producing to janitorial. Yeah.
So tell me, like, I don't know a ton about the building, the creation of an animated film. What exactly is the specialty of an effects animator?
So essentially what special effects is anything other than the character is usually what I tell people. Anything other than the character or the background that's moving is a special effect. So, water, rain, snow, mud, fireworks, lightning, electrical effects, fog, all kinds of natural phenomenon. Those are all considered to be special effects. Nowadays, you can't look at a movie without special effects touching it in some way, shape, or form, through computer generated images. And you look at any Marvel film, and virtually every scene in the film has had some sort of special effect or digitally enhanced effects added to it, whether that be backgrounds or whatever it is. You can't look at a major motion picture these days without visual effects impacting the film.
Yeah, so I'm wondering now what your opinion on the Disney Plus show, the series Zenimation, is, because that has to be a lot of the stuff that you actually worked on that show.
Something, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's so,
believe it or not.
That's another one. I'm sure that some of your work is highlighted on there, because they have. There'll be a wind show, and then there's a rain show, and it's literally everything else is silent except for that one effect. It's very well done.
Yeah,
really cool.
And it's interesting when you talk about like rain. We used a lot of live action effects throughout my career at Disney Animation. So if you look at a film like The Little Mermaid, which I worked on, or Pocahontas, or Beauty and the Beast, there's live action rain that's in those films that was actually shot on a soundstage back in 1939, 1940 for Bambi.
Whoa.
believe it or not.
That's
and
insane.
we were still using that live action footage for the animated pictures into, literally into the 90s.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I had no idea that's how that worked. So cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, this year is an anniversary for the Black Cauldron. It's an anniversary for Fantasia 2000, for Fantasia. And all of those films were very heavy with special effects.
That's very cool.
If you look at the Black Cauldron, we used a lot of live action, dry ice coming out of, the fog or mist coming out of the cauldron itself. All of that kind of stuff is what would have been done through the special effects department.
Very cool. I didn't even know. This is how ignorant I am. I didn't know that those were live action effects being put into the animated movies. How cool is that? I had no idea.
Well, I think when they're done well, everything blends together seamlessly. And that's, like when you don't notice some of that stuff,
sure,
that means we were successful because you feel it. When it's raining in a scene, you're not focused on the rain. You're focused on what the characters are doing. But the rain is helping to create the atmosphere and the mood.
Yeah.
And if it's done well, then it becomes believable, and it allows the audience to be immersed into what's going on in the film, as opposed to being pulled out of it, going, well, what is that? What is, why does that look that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what you remind me of is I forget who I heard talk about this, but the under the ocean scene in Pinocchio, how well done that was, and how you just. And I don't know if that had ever been done before, having like underwater where people are talking, and it felt like they were really underwater. Such a well done scene.
Yeah, and Phil, like if you look at the opening of The Little Mermaid, you feel like you're going underwater because we were using, I worked on the picture, but we were using ripple glass with the camera department that gives that distorted quality. But we didn't use that continuously through the film for everything that was underwater. You bring the audience down into the underwater environment, and as you're doing that, you kind of fade that stuff away. And then there's some little light reflection patterns that are kicking here and there on the scene. And again, the audience is focused on what the characters are doing, but you already believe you're underwater.
It's unbelievable to think of, like, there's that much going on in every single frame, in every single scene, and just how much work goes into something like that.
Well, you got to realize if you watch the screen credits of any of the Disney classic animated films, or the contemporary ones for that matter, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of artists and technicians that participate in making these films come together. I mean, it's truly a team effort. It's not one individual, but it's literally 500 or 600 people.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Actually, that's a good segue to my next question, because before you had that job, you started with the company like so many other artists and animators as an in-betweener. When I got hired, I started out, that was considered an entry-level position in animation. It was an in-betweener. You would get a stack of drawings from an assistant who had been working on a scene for the animator, and you would be charged with filling in the in-between drawings. And so, if a scene was on ones, meaning that there was a drawing for every frame, meaning 24 frames a second, you were doing a drawing for every single frame. I might get the scene from an assistant, and there may be 12 drawings, and I had to put a drawing between each one then, which was just incrementally different from the previous and following drawings. It was in between those two, and that's how you got the scene onto ones. Yeah, that's insanely. I can't imagine. Like, I remember back in the day when I would go to Walt Disney World, and they were still doing the animation there. I forget what movies they had done. You would know better than me.
They would have been working on Mulan down there. Brother Bear. What else did they do down there? They did parts of Lion King, parts of Pocahontas. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was just amazing to walk through and see them working on that. And then, I don't know the technical term, but when it would have the drawing, several of them in their hand, and it would kind of shuffle back and forth between them to kind of make sure that they were getting it right from
yeah, that's referred to as flipping, and you're actually rolling the drawings against the animation disc that's on your desk. So the animation disc had a translucent piece of glass or plastic on it, and behind that was a light. So you're illuminating your drawings through this sort of white, milky white plastic or glass. And that way you can actually see through the layers of paper. And the rolling action that you're doing, what we refer to as flipping the drawings, is that you're seeing the motion of those drawings right there in front of your eyes.
Wow, that's really cool. When you started with Walt Disney World, with Disney Animation, had you been a Disney fan? Did you grow up with the movies, watching them? Going to movies?
Absolutely. Although I have to tell you, I wasn't. I originally, when I went into animation, when I graduated high school, I actually went into a art program at a local university. I was going for advertising art. So I was looking to go into advertising, and I wound up taking a TV graphics class. Now you got to realize, Phil, this is pre-computer days.
Right.
This is before computers. I did a TV graphics class where I actually created my first piece of animation with my artwork. And it was not my first introduction to animation. I had done some stop motion animation when I was in high school with a Super 8 camera and all of that. But it was the first time I had done, what you would consider cell animation. And right around that time, somebody gave me an article from the New York Times that was talking about California Institute of the Arts in Los Angeles. It's called CalArts. CalArts had an animation department, and they were training new artists for the Disney studios. And so I really loved the experience in this TV graphic class. So I applied to CalArts. I sent my portfolio out to CalArts. I wound up getting accepted. They only accepted 30 students a year. I was one of 30 people accepted, and I got a Walt Disney scholarship to boot to go there. And I moved out to Los Angeles, and I had the intention of completing the program and then going back to New York to get into advertising and do animated commercials in New York. And it was just so funny because, a lot of my classmates were people that have gone on to direct some great movies. And, they were all like, oh my gosh, I want to work at Disney. And like, Dave, what do you want to do? I'm going to go back to New York and get into advertising, So it was rather funny because when I got out of CalArts, I got hired by Don Bluth Studios. Oh, wow. To work on Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, which were early animated video games. And then when that was complete and the studio went under, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just come over to Disney, and they're looking for people to help finish the Black Cauldron. And I thought, all right, well, I'll submit my portfolio and see what happens. And I got hired, and I thought, all right, I'll work on this picture, and then I'll go back to New York. And when I finished that picture, they said, we're going to hold on to you and put you on to the next picture. And I thought, all right, well, I'll do one more picture and then I'll go back to New York. And that went on for about 5 pictures before I decided, well, I guess I'm going to stay in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So what's that, 30 some years later? You're still there?
So now I've been out here in Los Angeles for 40 years.
Wow. Yeah. I got to imagine it's hard to leave that area when you get out there.
Well, you know something, I got to tell you, it's been tough this year. I mean, between the pandemic and these raging wildfires and windstorms and earthquakes, and I mean, honestly, I think we're just waiting for the four horsemen of the apocalypse to appear on the horizon.
No, I hear you. I meant maybe before this year, maybe up until 2019. I have a buddy that I met on. We worked on the Disney College program 22 years ago, and we've stayed close friends. And he's an executive in Disneyland, and he's been gloating to me for the last several years about how great it is. And now I get to just make fun of him a little bit.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
So when you did get the job, when you were working at Disney, when you were, in that studio, walking into those buildings every day, did you get to, kind of rub elbows with some of the animation greats, any of the 9 Old Men, anybody like that while you were there?
Yeah, actually, while I was at Cal Arts, I had a number of instructors that were, people that had really made a mark at the studio. Jack Hanna was the guy that headed the animation program when I was at Cal Arts, and he, of course, was a story guy during the Golden Age. He directed many of the Donald Duck and Chippendale cartoons that the studio produced in the 40s and 50s. And also worked with Tee. Tee was a caricature teacher at Cal Arts. He had worked on Fantasia and all these other great movies at the studio. Elmer Plummer was my life drawing teacher. He's the guy that designed the dancing mushrooms in Fantasia and worked on a bunch of films at the studio. I mean, he's a legend in and of himself. We had people like Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson come up to Cal Arts to lecture. Ward Kimball I met a few times. Mark Davis. I actually know Mark's widow, Alice Davis, quite well. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Claude Coates when I first started working at the studio. And I got to chat with him on an almost weekly basis. I used to visit with him in the mornings for probably the last year and a half of his time at the studio, and he worked there for 54 years. So I got a lot of firsthand stories from him. Eric Larson was probably one of the last of the 9 Old Men that was still working at the studio for a number of years, after I got hired. I had met Wooly Riderman a number of times. John Lounsbury had already passed away. I didn't know him at all. And a few of the other guys, I never met.
So cool that you got to be there and just experience it. Kind of, I guess the studio wasn't exactly in its heyday, but you were there when it rebounded and you had this second great wave of Disney animated films.
There's a great article that was written by a guy named Drew Taylor on Collider.com, on how the Black Cauldron nearly killed Disney animation.
That was your first one you worked on. Right?
And so, when I got hired on the Black Cauldron, I really kind of thought, well, this might be my first and last picture in the business.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. And then not too long after that, Little Mermaid, and you're really cruising after that. Then it was just
I think that on Black Cauldron there was a big management shakeup at the studio, and a bunch of new CEO Michael Eisner and the COO Frank Wells came in, and then Jeffrey Katzenberg came in, and they really kind of turned the studio around, the whole company. They didn't know anything about animation when they first got there, and their inclination really was to just shut down the animation department. But it was Roy E. Disney, Walt's nephew and the son of Walt's brother, Roy O. Disney, who saved Disney animation. You know, he became chairman of the animation department, and he really gave the artists the tools they needed to succeed. And so you got to give Roy Disney a lot of credit for that whole renaissance of Disney animation.
Yeah, he saved the company twice, basically. I mean,
yeah, he really did. He really did. He was really a terrific person, very down to earth, very approachable, super nice. I had the pleasure of working with him for like 18 years on a variety of projects, including Fantasia 2000 and Destino. And the first book I ever wrote was Remembering Roy E. Disney. I wrote that a few years after he had passed away.
Yeah, I want everybody to get that book too, by the way. If you're listening, you need to get that one too. Just because there's so much, not a lot. I think the casual Disney fan doesn't know a ton about Roy E. Disney, right? And
no, I agree with you. And I wrote that book from the perspective that when people read the book, because it's a collection of stories on different things, you know, different topics, when you finish reading that book, I wanted people to have a sense of what kind of a person he was, you know, as a human being. And I think I succeeded because I've gotten a lot of really nice comments from people over the years on that book.
Awesome. Just a couple more questions for you. One, you mentioned Claude Coates.
Yeah.
I remember reading that you on Facebook, that you had been working on a book about Claude Coates. Do you have any, is that coming out any, you know, obviously it's coming out after the 3D Disneyland book. Do you have an idea when that might be?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Phil, because, you know, writing is a process and putting out a book is a process. And the 3D Disneyland book, I finished that last year and it's just coming out now.
Sure.
And so I've spent most of the pandemic, most of this year really, working on the Claude Coates book, and I've finished my first draft manuscript. I've had the book out to Claude's son, Alan Coates, and his wife, Anne, and they've both read the manuscript, and they've given me a few notes, nothing major, and I'm going back in and I'm doing my polish pass on it. And then it's going to go to a couple more, what we refer to as beta readers, you know, people that really know the subject matter who are going to read it and give me any notes that they might have. And the book is on track to be designed and laid out this fall. And it's going to come out next summer. Ahead of schedule, actually, because we actually told people who pre-ordered that book that it was going to come out in the fall of 21. It's actually going to come out. They're going to get their copies in the summer of 21.
Awesome. Best of luck with that. I'm looking forward to reading that one as well. I think there's a lot of people, especially Claude Coates, in the Disney history of the Disney company, who haven't been really represented, and people don't know a lot about them. So
well,
cool.
You know something, you know, Claude especially, you know, here's a guy who worked for Disney for 54 years. He's a Disney legend. He worked closely with Walt Disney. I mean, Walt trusted him. You know, Walt made him the guy, you know, he was the show designer for Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah. You know, he was the show designer for Adventures Through Inner Space. He show designed essentially the Haunted Mansion, and you know, he was a soft-spoken guy. He was somewhat of an introvert, but he wasn't one of these guys that was out tooting his horn all the time. You know,
sure.
He was more interested in being a team player. He mentored many of the up and coming Imagineers. And it really is it was kind of a shame that there was nothing written on him. And, you know, again, it was somewhat serendipitous how I got involved in the project. And the fact that I knew him personally, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for writing that wrong. I'm really looking forward to reading it.
I'm excited about the book because I've had full access to the family archive, to Claude's papers and photos and artwork and everything, and it's just really pretty amazing. There's pictures that are going to be in this book. Again, people have never seen this stuff before, and we're getting it out into the world, and again, it's another piece of the Disney universe, another piece of the big Disney puzzle of, what we love so much about the Disney company and what Walt had created that lives on. We all want to know more about it. What's the backstories and all of those things?
Absolutely. Last question for you. Do you have a favorite Disney book that you've bought that you haven't written, that obviously that you've read? And what would you recommend? What book would you recommend to a Disney fan who wants to know more about either Disneyland or the company or Walt Disney himself?
Well, okay. So there's really two answers to this, because one of my favorite books, which I bought when it first came out decades ago, was The Illusion of Life, Disney animation, The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. And it is probably I consider it the Bible for animation, even today, because of they explain in detail all the principles of animation. And, anybody who's interested in animation, wants to know more about animation or just the concept behind Disney animation. Why does Disney animation appear different than other animated films? That to me is the book. It really is the go-to book for animation. Now, if you're interested in the parks, there's a wonderful book by a friend of mine, Todd Pierce James. And let me hold on one second.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I always say his name wrong. It's Todd James Pierce. I always think his last name is Todd James. But so Todd James Pierce wrote a book called 3 Years in Wonderland: The Disney Brothers, C.V. Wood, and the Making of the Great American Theme Park. And I got to tell you, it is hair-raising reading this book and what went on behind the scenes to get Disneyland open in 1955.
Awesome. Yeah, what's funny is I did a podcast a couple of years ago about C.V. Wood. I just put both of these books in my Amazon in my cart because I'm going to order them both tonight. But
listen, Todd did a fabulous job on researching this book, and I thought it was just an enjoyable read, and it gives you so many interesting backstories to parts of Disneyland and the problems they encountered. Rivers of America, when they went to fill it, kept draining. The water just kept absorbing into the ground. It was like all this crazy stuff. And you just, as you're reading it, you're like, oh my gosh, how did Walt get this park open? You know what I mean?
In a year, too. In a year.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Compared to how long we waited for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah.
And it's a year they did the whole thing.
And Phil, those are just a couple of books. There's so many great books, and I'm friends with a lot of the authors that have written some of these wonderful books, literally. Like Mindy Johnson's, Disney animation, The Women of Ink and Paint. All of these great books that have come out over the years, on every topic you can imagine. I just tell people, Google, when you go on to, Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of those places, just plug in, Disney history, or Disneyland or Disney World and see what comes up, because there's so many fabulous books out there. And believe me, I've got a whole library full of them.
Yeah, as I fill up my Amazon.com cart, my wife is going to be like, you got to be kidding me. You bought more Disney books. I know I have that coming to me tonight, I'm sure. One book I wanted to ask you about, I'm sure you know about it, but I had him on the show a couple years ago. Super nice guy. Walt's Disneyland, it's there if you know where to find it, or by Jim Denny. I don't know if you have that one.
Yeah. I've heard of it. I don't know Jim personally, though.
Super nice guy. Just he wrote a few books with Pat Williams, the former GM of the Orlando Magic. Big Disney fan, big Walt Disney fan. But Walt's Disneyland is my favorite book that he's done. And it's another one of those ones that tells you where to go to touch and to be where Walt was in the park. Super, super cool. It's a great book.
There's so much, it's so rich in history, Phil. Yeah. And that's what's wonderful. And I'm just so glad there's folks out there that have interviewed a lot of these people, and, you know, and there's so many facets to the stories. It's really just, wonderful when you uncover something new, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of been my goal since I started this podcast, trying to get as many people on here that either worked with Walt or are a couple, you know, generations removed from him. I mean, just so I want to hear those stories firsthand. I love that stuff. So like Rolly Crump I've had on, and Bob Gurr and Julie Andrews and people like that. Just so cool to hear stories about Disneyland or about Walt from them directly. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm super lucky to be in the spot that I am. But thank you so much for being on the show. This was amazing. You are the nicest guy, and thank you for you know, spending the time with me and for being so generous with your time. Everyone has to go get, as soon as it comes out in October, right? 3D Disneyland.
Yeah, and by the way, they don't have to wait. They can pre-order it.
Yeah, pre-order.
They're welcome to pre-order the book on any of the sites, or, you know, directly. Even though the limited edition version of the book is sold out, they can still get an author-signed copy. I'm still signing copies for the publisher to send out.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you so much for your time. This was great, and I really appreciate it. And I would just tell people that are listening, they just have to go to theoldmill.com. Theoldmill.com is where they can order the book. And there's links through to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million at that website as well. Or if they want to get the signed copy, they can do that. And I also want to mention, Phil, if people want, they can go to my website, davidbossert.com. davidbossert.com, and there's a whole bunch of material there for people to read. It's all free. They can read it. There's free things. There's a free stuff tab. There's all kinds of stuff. Awesome. So yeah, everybody go do that. Dave, thank you so much. This was a blast. I really appreciate it.
I had a great time, Phil. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Be well and stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ear to There Disney Podcast. Thank you again to my guest, Dave Bossert, and thank you to Bob Gurr for answering another question on the show. Now, at the start of the show, I told you that Dave has generously donated one of his new 3D Disneyland books to give away. I'm going to give that to a lucky winner who can answer this question. What was the name of the camera that was used to take all of these 3D photos of Disneyland? The answer is in the episode that you just listened to. So if you know it, please do me a favor, email that answer to me at phil@ear2theretravel.com. And out of all the correct submissions that I get, I will randomly choose one winner of the 3D Disneyland book. Again, what was the camera that was used to take all of those 3D pictures of Disneyland? You have until next Friday, September 18th, 2020 to email your answer. Again, email it to phil@ear2theretravel.com. So good luck, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Just remember, there will be a new episode of the Ear to There Disney Podcast next week, as well as a new Walt Disney World Word of the Week episode. So until next time, have an amazing week. Go get yourself a little sweater. It's getting cool out there. Except, of course, for where the Disney parks are in Orlando and Anaheim. It's still really hot there. But get yourself a little sweater, get your pumpkin spice, enjoy the fall, have an amazing week. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Ear to there, ear to there.